Good evening, and thank you very, very much for coming out in this blisteringly hot evening to participate in this workshop, and I can hardly wait. I know so many of you and how smart you all are, so I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say about what I've been thinking and so forth. So, does your company pound or flex is the title. And then here's, have you ever been to a talk and you've gone away and said, oh, they said some great stuff, but I don't remember a single thing really that they said. So I'm gunning for your long-term memory, gunning for it, okay? So this is what I'd like you to go away knowing. If I do my job, won't be your fault if you don't know this, it's on me. But this is what I'd love for you to know, what critical thinking is and is not, why critical thinking is such a big deal. And the second thing is your laser DLPFC, I shall explain, and why that is a very big deal. So that's two things right there. Then we're going to put those together and discuss how critical thinking and your brain play out in the workplace or not. And then critical thinking is encouraged at flex companies. And so I'd like you to think about the larger piece as well as the kind of local way that you can do critical thinking. All righty. So I hope you'll go home thinking, that's what you'd go home knowing, but I hope you'll go home thinking, I wonder whether we could try, now your idea inserted here, instead of current whatever is going on at the workplace, how could we do a pilot test on that? So that's what I hope you'll be sort of noodling over as a result of the workshop. And then if you wouldn't even dream of doing this or broaching such a thing, then I hope you'll be thinking, they'd never let me do that. I wonder if I could join a flex company. So I'm very subversive, you notice? You thought we're just coming for critical thinking and subversion, okay? All right, so, but first, a word from our sponsor. So, what is that? And I'm glad you're laughing. That is just, I think you recognize the brain, but what is that blue splop that's right in the way of everything? It's just splobbed there, stuff. Very, very strange thing. And yet this is the tool with which you do critical thinking and then some other stuff. But it's super important. There's some very important information about this that I want you to be thinking about. So, and I would like, because scientists would never brand this and make it look any good. They'll still show this picture, they'll still show this multi-syllabic thing, but we're business people. We can market this sucker, okay? So I need your help to think about how to do that. But first you want to be thinking with me, well, what does this thing do? So you're telling me this is the super thing and it's sponsoring everything. What is it? This is the part of the brain that is the decider. It's the payer attentioner as well. So it's a very big deal in the brain. I don't mean for 1 second to suggest you don't make decisions without a whole bunch of other parts of your brain, and we're going to be talking about that in the second half. But for the moment, just really consider that this is that pointy sort of decider. It is the thing that I'm paying attention with to give you this talk, and you're paying attention back, I hope, to me. But that's another part of this, which is this tool that we have is flighty. It doesn't necessarily stick. So if you might be going, oh God, it's hot in here. So that's then, that DLPFC, as it's lovingly known in science as well, is a very labile, changeable kind of thing. So how would you market that? This thing is so old, it really needs a brand update, don't you think? It's 1 million years old. It's 5 million years old, depends on where you count from in terms of evolutionary thinking. So any thoughts of what this could look like, pointy thing? No, you're waiting to hear what I think, which is fine. Okay, so I will tell you what I have come up with. It is a lightsaber. It's like a lightsaber. So it is not a flaming rolling pin. It kind of looks like that too. But it's actually a lightsaber, and that's meant to show how absolutely pointed and how precise it is. So this, and let's just keep calling it the lightsaber, okay? Or laser. I'm going to intermingle those terms because lightsabers are heavy to pack, you know, into the group here. But I also have this handy dandy cat toy that describes it as well. So let me shoot it at the ceiling. So that's me and my little trembly hand. So it just shows this is really how narrow the attention is. What's fascinating is that we kind of, and that doesn't show, So we kind of tend to think we can think all sorts of things at once. That's kind of our intuition. Yeah, the world is big, I can think about anything. But it is not the case. It's not the case. So I'm harping on this a bit, and it's one thing I really hope that you will remember, because it has profound implications for what happens at the workplace. Profound implications. So here's a little description. So here's the thing. If I want to be talking to you and I'm walking across the stage and I'm still making sense and making a coherent sentence, that's because I'm using my motor cortex at the same time as I'm using my laser. So you can walk and chew gum and iron, as long as you know how to iron. It's your first time ironing, got to laser in and learn it. But once it goes into habit and into your motor cortex, you're cool. You can do any of those things. And in fact, surprisingly, data suggest that by exercising and moving, that actually helps thought process. And that was considered like ridiculous. Nobody thought about that 10 years ago. I want to talk about ridiculousness going into, well, of course, because that's another big part of critical thinking. So you can think deep or silly thoughts, but here's the thing. They gotta come one at a time. And a lot of us think that we can multitask, but it has really been shown not to work. So what happens with your laser is you're just running back and forth with it, right? So you do this, I can do that, but it's serial, it's always serial. So in that process of moving from one thing to the other, you're losing a lot of time and so forth. And interestingly, the people who think they're really good at multitasking, according to this Stanford study, are worse. They're worse. So it's fascinating. Again, it's a great case of our intuitions really not working, not panning out because of the evidence. And that's a big deal about critical thinking, because there's a lot of stuff about evidence and so forth. So, for instance, at the workplace, I'm writing a report, stuff. I can't be writing a report and then reflecting on the usefulness of the report. I'm either in it or my laser is reflecting on it. So that's a crucial distinction I hope you'll keep in mind. And I will keep harping on you lovingly for a little bit about that. Okay, so it's 10 a.m. Do you know where your laser is? So that's kind of the idea of thinking about this. And I've got a story to tell about myself. So I was putting this deck together, and the next bullet point, I think I got that. And my laptop started saying, something's going on, we have to shut down and start again. And I'm going, and so I'm still thinking the bullet point, the thing's starting again. And and then it did it again. And then it's sort of like I was in an airplane that was going down and I was looking under the cockpit, right? instead of just pulling back. So pulling back and reflecting on what was going on, I finally did, finally got it backed up. But I thought, oh my gosh, this is a great example of getting into something and then being so good at sort of paying attention that you can't pull back out. And I think a lot of our work days have to do with that, where people just get onto this track and they're doing things again and again, and they don't get into that mode because we don't think to do it, because our lasers are busy. Don't bother me. I'm busy following a process. Okay. So now I want to layer critical thinking onto that. So critical thinking is that pulling back and reflecting, and it's the comparison of alternative theories or arguments in light of their evidence. So when I pull back and I reflect about the report, that's the beginning of critical thinking. I'm starting to think, is that necessary? What else could there be? And so for you, I brought another toy, the scale. So this scale is meant to represent that kind of weighing of alternatives, which is really the heart and soul of critical thinking. Weighing in the light of not what I like better, not what somebody else says, but evidence. So it's evidence which is something outside of these two opinions and so forth. So, and now here's the thing. This is such an important skill or habit, and you're already doing it. You're already doing it. So I'm just kind of trying to explain how broad it is and how really profound it is. It happens in daily life, but it also has to do with the growth of knowledge throughout history. It's so exciting. So if you ask, should I accept job A or B, you're weighing. Is the theory that cells commit suicide better than the theory that cells just wear out and die, which was hotly contested, and suicide won? It's really interesting, called apoptosis. Those people in fields all over the place are doing that same kind of weighing, just as we could be doing more of at work. All sorts of things in daily life. Should I vote for Anna or Mark? Do you like restaurant A, B, or C the best? You can do 3. You can't get too many things weighing. The brain kind of starts smoking and going into overdrive with too many things that you're trying to do. And then, this is a workplace question, which I'm going to ask you guys to play around with in a few minutes. Should we do something instead of meeting every week for 1.5 hours? So that's going to be a hypothetical I'm presenting to you. So you got one side. Critical thinking means you get the other side of the scales and you try to figure out what might be best. Does that make sense? All right, you're looking at me like, okay, Connie, all right. So any questions at this point? Are we good to keep going? All right. So you weigh and you use evidence whenever you can or wherever you can, but if you start, like what if you don't like something particularly about what I'm saying, but you can't come up with any evidence, but you just throw out a reason? Well, that's fair. It's the start of that process of going back and forth. So that's just the beginning of a nice iterative kind of process where we do more critical thinking together. Much better if you can, if it's to hand, you have evidence which I call reasons on steroids, which is a larger data set. So if I can say that I like the iPhone better than the Android phone, well, that's okay. That's okay. And I give a reason for it about the aesthetics or the way it works or something, fair. But if I can say something about millions of people preferring the iPhone, heavier duty, right? Heavy, okay. So that is the weighing and evidence. So Another thing to keep in mind, because you might be going, this feels sort of abstract, but there's lots of synonyms for alternatives. Theories, hypotheses, arguments, even, well, I make this case and somebody makes that case, you know, that kind of thing, or pros and cons. All of those things are just synonyms for the notion of what critical thinking is doing. But it's not one theory, remember. You gotta have two or more. Can't just delve into one. You can do some of that, but really more profoundly, what you want is that kind of thing. Otherwise, you're just analyzing within one idea. So I came up with this idea, thinking about it, that things are theories. That table that you're sitting by is a theory. It's a theory of the beautiful or the useful and or it's fun. It's fun. Alex will put her feet on that. It's fun. She can put her feet on that little doohickey. It's useful. It's great. So every human-made thing you could think of as itself a living theory, which is, I think, fun. And the growth of products is just like the growth of knowledge. Stair-stepping forward, this one's better than that one, you hope, or some reversals. But by and large, when we're comparing products, we're also doing the same thing. We're doing critical thinking. So a product is really like a theory that we're weighing. Should I buy this or whatever? Okay. So here's the kind of thing. Now, this is going to sound like something you learned in school, I hope, but there are these levels of evidence. So the most heavy-duty and telling form of evidence is a controlled experiment, where you're ruling out alternatives. And here's the thing, we can do this at work. We have got some kick-ass user researchers in the audience who know exactly how to do this. So when we go to have people sort of play around in a minute, I'm going to get you playing in a minute, but if people are confused, there's plenty of people here who are amazing, who can understand this and understand pilot testing. So pilot testing of alternatives. And here's the thing too, you can research other people's results. If you're wondering, for instance, about the length of meeting times, hey, what's online? What other data are there that I can throw into the pot if I'm feeling like finding out that way? Now, second in line is correlation, which is large-scale connections, incredibly helpful. Usually when you get those connections, you want to look for a mechanism, which is how you do your controlled experiment. But lots of times we do surveys and we search for those connections, especially exciting if there's unexpected connections. But you never know how these things are connected for sure. And then down the line, there's historical arguments. And my argument about critical thinking is historical argument, because I can't run a controlled experiment on it. So that's my best level right there. But I think it's good compared to the alternative viewpoint. And then just finally an appeal to reason and experience, and a single observation is known as anecdotal evidence. So that's the whole sort of pecking order, if you will, about evidence. So I want to get you excited about the different areas where critical thinking has driven knowledge. And you might end up, after my slide, going, everywhere? And my answer would be, yeah, everywhere. So just ticking off. So starting with physics, Isaac Newton and the impetus theory, which is a much more intuitive way of thinking about how you would throw something or throw a ball. He completely swept that theory away, and there's massive amount of evidence. And we have airplane flight to prove it, that the Newtonian version of physics, I'm just talking the world, not Einstein, but that has reigned supreme ever since. Biology, Darwin versus a view most of us have never even heard of, called the ideal types, that each animal was supposed to approximate its ideal type, whatever that meant. But that has been completely blown away by the theory of evolution, which is so factual. There's no doubt factually about it compared to any other theory at the moment. And what has happened is that has spawned huge fields like genetics and immunology. So these would not make sense without this. It's just massive, massive. So immunotherapy for cancer or something has to do with genetics and has to do with evolution. Okay, so social sciences. You say, Connie, okay, you got physics, you got biology. Give me some social science. John Stuart Mill in the 19th century got in trouble for arguing for the intellectual equality of women. And he wrote a book about that. He lost his seat in Parliament. He was a philosopher, but everybody thought that was so nuts. And if you're male, no worries, because women didn't think that they were the equal intellectually of men either. Women voted down the Equal Rights Act. Isn't that fascinating? We're just in a different intuitive sensibility about those things. But without that argument and without convincing people over time of the alternative that, oh yes, they are intellectually equal, we wouldn't have Nobel Prize winners like Marie Curie and Barbara McClintock. So, and a bunch of tons of other people, obviously, people sitting right here. And then let's do economics, behavioral economics versus this rational view. Turns out we are crazy, but in some very predictable ways in terms of our financial decisions. And the rational view never quite fit with that. And this guy named Richard Thaler, who said when he was a graduate student, he said, I started having deviant thoughts. I just love that. So he had deviant thoughts, which led to this notion of the way in which we make sort of very odd decisions, very odd decisions. So there's like the fallacy of sunk costs. I've started to do something, so I better just keep doing it, no matter how crazy that is, and so forth. But they, you know, it's being quantified now. It's made really into a science, and so forth. Sports. Did you guys see Moneyball? Anybody saw that movie? Well, that really talked about this new idea of using statistics for picking players versus intuitive team selection. You know, is his girlfriend beautiful or something? You know, which was kind of what was going on. So statistics and what they actually did absolutely blew away this, which had been that was the reasonable view. So then you can just go on and on. Products, auto safety and seat belts. That was once hotly debated back in the day, because what if somebody would get crushed in their car because of a seat belt? What if you'd be safer if you got thrown out of your car, maybe roll on the lawn or whatever? No. So no more. Nobody's questioning that anymore. Is exercise a good thing or not? Solved, but people worried for a while that it could cause heart attack, which it can sometimes, but it's overwhelmingly better, and so forth. And then one of my favorites, best type of workplace. So we're going to have some kind of alternative thinking about that. Quantum computing was thought to be nuts. Nobody could ever do it. We're getting there. We're getting there. It's amazing. And then drugs for some psychiatric issues. It was thought that only through psychoanalysis could you get better, and taking a drug wouldn't work. We've found that that isn't necessarily the case. And here's one I want you guys to play with later because it's so interesting. It's the new whole field of chronobiology, which is lots of research on the best time of day to do something. Is anybody familiar with that in here? Oh, good. Okay, we can teach the rest. It's great. It's just, you will be so amazed by that. Okay, so now let's drive some knowledge at work. So the question is, could these reports be different? Could they be eliminated? Or something bigger? Could we try selling phones at neighborhood parties of some weird sort, instead of or along with having people go down to a store. That sounds crazy, but maybe. Could we follow the new data on chronobiology and do things at optimum times of the day? So that's something that we can fool with in a minute. So the whole idea is that you've got this situation, you want to create and be innovative and create an alternative, and then you're going to weigh those two to see which is better. And the thing you might always have done, the hour-and-a-half meetings might be just golden. Once you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that necessarily you might change. It has to do with weighing, right? Not necessarily changing. But I think there's a lot that could change upon being weighed, because I have a theory of how some of this stuff gets going at the workplace that is not very rational, if you will. Okay, now time to look at your handout. Has everybody got their handout? Everybody got something? And if you would, can I bring that back there? If you would just on your own, just fill out this first one. Okay. Can I have a show of hands of people who said all of the above? Okay, one, two, what do you think, a quarter? I'm not sure. Okay. Other people, unnecessary meetings, raise hands if you had that. Okay, that's all right, we'll deal with that. Incessant emails, okay. Cumbersome reports, okay. Processes with too many steps, they're kind of abstract, but you got it, okay. All right, so it's maybe because not everybody said everything that all of these was like maybe a quarter of you soaking wet. Try all of you again, let's see what, that's pretty good, all right. Or pretty bad, depending on your point of view. Okay, so let me tell you what, so the results. So I've been doing these online classes for O'Reilly Publishers. They're the ones with the wonderful animals and the white backgrounds, are technical books, and they kind of branched out into management and stuff. So I run about 2,000 people through these courses, and I've asked them that very same question that I asked you. And 75% of people said everything, which is amazing. You might be 50, maybe when I saw people. I'm not trying to talk you into problems, right? I'm just trying to figure it out. And if you don't mind, I'll collect those at the end so I can sort of do a little data crunching on them. Also, by the way, if you don't want to sort of say this about your company and you feel a little uncomfortable, you can always, I won't out you or anything, but you can always sort of say, well, it was a company I used to work. It's perfect where I am right now. It's brilliant, but it's that other company. So don't worry about that part of it. But this just shows an enormous need, I think, for people to do that kind of critical thinking, pulling back out, and then figuring out a possible step forward. Okay, so never underestimate being lazy. If you think it would fly, that you could just come in with some kind of very honkin' report, right? That would really explain why the meeting should be, now fill in the blank, and you think that would fly, then that's good, right? So you don't have to go through it. The thing about doing some kind of pilot testing is it has a wonderful side benefit, which is that people want autonomy. People want to feel they're in control. And if people take it on themselves to figure out what the optimum amount of time is, that's wonderful. because we all crave that. We crave that. There's a wonderful book by Daniel Pink called Drive, where he talks about that. Yeah, it's a great book, and autonomy is so important. Okay, so that partly could be part of the fun, but it wouldn't hurt to find out through the literature sort of what other people had done and then how to proceed. Okay, so here's just how many people have had a science course. User, yeah, probably, yeah. Okay, so this is just, 101. You have an experimental group. This group does something you think could help, known as the variable. This is like something different from the reports that you're saying are not so good, or the whatever. Whatever that is, this is going to be the other side of the critical thinking. Okay, so, and then you keep everything else the same as much as you can, collect evidence, and so forth. And then the control group is what was going on before. So now I think I'm going to ask you guys, let's do this one together. So we have people calling out and sort of seeing how this works. So here's Sung, poor Sung. He slaves over these reports for upper management. He spends hours on bullet points and spacing because they want it a certain way. They want those bullets to be, Sung slaves over that. Many times, senior management has him reschedule presentations because they're so busy. And remember, they've got the same setup that we do, right? They've got the same laser brains, and they're going 6 ways to sundown, right? So they finally get in there, and then maybe they goof off because they're so relieved, and they don't pay that much attention necessarily, at least not that Sung can tell. Okay, so how would you apply critical thinking to the value of these reports? Okay, let's do theory that the reports are not optimal, to say the least. I mean, that would have to be fleshed out with the alternative hypothesis, right? But I'm just making it blah so that you guys can cook up something. So what else could Sung do? Kimmy, sock it to me. Yes?
Quick top lines right after.
Sorry?
Quick top lines, like quick brief summaries.
Yes.
Right after whatever he was doing to write the report.
Okay, so would that be on top of the report or in lieu of the report? Or either one?
A different kind of report?
Different report, got it. Lot.
The headline that spells out the worst news.
Okay.
That would pay attention. When it's really, really bad, you pay attention.
Okay, all right. Excellent. Any other thoughts about this? Yes. Yes, that's another thing, which is like the null hypothesis, I guess. No report at all, and then see what happens. Just kind of like, yeah, it's just something that is on automatic pilot, so that if that works, hey, that's really good. Okay, you guys know what you're doing. So I have another request of you to look at Pat's meetings, and will you do this with a neighbor? Just have fun messing around with some alternatives. It's the same idea. I've got the scenario written down there that Pat is the manager and has meetings that last 1.5 hours a week. Team not happy. Pat thinks the meetings are worthwhile, but is willing to consider alternatives. So, go ahead and talk all you like.